Sell me this beverage.
Okay, here I go. You're thirsty and you like a great drink, right? Okay, well, I can promote Sparkplug Coffee. They've been our sponsor for about 9 years, and they continue to offer up the freshest beans in Canada. These little brown guys are fairly traded, premium Arabica beans, and you can get them in decaf or half-calf. Should I continue trying to sell you this beverage?
Yes.
All right, well, Sparkplug offers you a wide range of blends and roasts, including rotating seasonal blends. And whatever you do order will arrive in a week. Shipping is free for Canadians. Americans will have to pay for their shipments, but that's a small inconvenience to get something great. What will make this experience all that much more awesome is to be a member. You'll get perks and deals that the average schmo who only orders occasionally won't get, and you'll save money on every order. You can also customize to get your orders when it suits you, not when Sparkplug insists on sending you things that you might not need. Maybe you're taking your yacht over to Europe to aid your criminal activities, so having coffee waiting on your doorstep would just be a major drag for you and especially for the coffee. Those are big reasons this is not a Coffee of the Month club. Ready, set, go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES. Use our HYES promo code and you will save 20% off your very next order. So did I sell that beverage to you well enough?
You tell me.
I guess so. Okay, our lip wag about Jordan Belfort's exploits is seconds away, so Bev, you need to say that key word.
And action! Have you ever seen
The Wolf of Wall Street? Hi there, movie monkeys, and thank you for spending some of your day putting an ear to the 530th Coke Snort of the Classic Movies podcast known as Have You Ever Seen? We'll be spoiling every little bit of today's film, so know that now. I'm your arrogant, talking directly to the camera host of today's debauchery, Ryan Ellis. And here's the Duchess, the lovely lady who enjoys the theory of having sex on a stack of money, but doesn't want all those paper cuts on her back. My Gordon Gekko-esque wife, Bev.
That's me.
Apparently Margot Robbie did get a lot of paper cuts from that scene where she fucks Leo on the money. Before we get into this, I should mention that this is the third time we've reviewed a movie this year that we have reviewed before. We did what we called the Now Playing Project in late 2013 and into 2014. Back then we made a habit of coming home from seeing something new in the theater and then doing a context-free chit-chat about it. So here we are nearly 10 years later taking a much closer look at The Wolf of Wall Street. And I did listen to our podcast, by the way, we did all those years ago. I don't know, we really need to do this again. We did a pretty good job considering we didn't know that much about it. We had just watched it.
I forgot to go back and listen to it, so let's hope I knock it out of the park again. Let's hope I have just as many smart things to say. We'll see.
Well, you should probably heard in the coffee sponsor, you got a lot of noise out there today. Their neighbor is having their porch fixed and they're drilling and making all kinds of noises out there.
The weather is also being a real drama queen.
It went away fast, though, because there's no rain right now. But during the sponsorship a few minutes ago, we had a really bad storm. Maybe it was on The Godfather all those years ago. We commented on that, and then I listened to the episode later and thought, really? I can't really hear it there. Anyway. Okay, the coming attractions opinion question for The Wolf of Wall Street. We've reviewed several Scorsese-De Niro collaborations. Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and Goodfellas. We've also talked about Marty and Leo doing The Departed together. Scorsese has made 5 movies with DiCaprio, with Killers of the Flower Moon coming out in October, while Bob and Marty have made 9 films together, with Killers of the Flower Moon coming out in October. They're both in that. So Bob had a big head start on Leo and has been in nearly double the amount of Marty flicks. But which is your favorite collaboration? Marty and Bob or Marty and Leo?
So even though I would say I prefer Leonardo DiCaprio as an actor, I think that the films that Scorsese made with De Niro are better. Really comes down to Goodfellas and Taxi Driver. I never really loved Raging Bull, but nothing Leo has made with Scorsese has really measured up to those 2 films.
Most films people make don't measure up to those films.
Well, exactly. Those are pretty high standards.
Not just those 2 people.
I'm going to have like a lot of praise to say for this movie and for DiCaprio in it, even though I'm sure he's probably more like Jordan Belfort than what we wish he was like in real life. But he's a great actor. What can I say?
I have to go with De Niro, too, for those big 3 alone that we covered way back in the AFI era when we started this podcast. Never mind The King of Comedy or Casino. We haven't covered those. I'm not the hugest fan of Casino. I do love King of Comedy. But it's remarkable that Marty has made so many good films with Leo that there's even a contest here. The ones with Leo are The Aviator, Gangs of New York, The Departed, Shutter Island, and then this. They haven't worked together in about 10 years until this fall. And by the way, Margot Robbie's got the biggest hit of the summer and might be the biggest hit of the year. And she's the, I guess, 3rd lead in this film. And then you got Leo and Marty coming with Bob making the movie in October. So we didn't mean for this movie to be timely that way, but in a way it is.
Had you ever seen her in anything before this movie came out?
We talked about that in the previous podcast we did about this movie. I never heard of her before. She was in that show about planes or flying or something.
Oh, she was in Pan Am, which was not a particularly popular show. I don't even remember if it got renewed for a second season. So you can't say that she was really a star before that.
No, she was not.
But she was a star as soon as people saw this movie, that's for sure.
And seeing some of the people that were considered to be the character, I think Olivia Wilde was maybe the next choice, and she would have been great because she was a stunner back then. She looks good now, but Margot Robbie in Barbie, yeah, it's makeup, she has to look perfect, but oh my God, she may be the best looking woman that's ever been in Hollywood, and not even Olivia Wilde can compete with that. Not that she had to be perfect in this, but it does not hurt. So Bloody Motherfucking Asshole was released, one of our favorite Angry at Your Dad songs. What's her name again? Wainwright.
Martha Wainwright. Yeah. Rufus Wainwright's sister, actually. Rufus Wainwright, who was in The Aviator.
I think all three of them were, the father and her too. I think I read that somewhere, that they're all involved in that movie. Yeah, well, anyway, so that refers to Belfort. Was released going on 10 years ago by Paramount on Christmas Day, 2013. The budget was high, but it ended up nearly quadrupling that $100 million price tag when you account for global totals. Please remind us what it's about and give us a skinny on The Wolf of Wall Street.
Leonardo DiCaprio is real guy Jordan Belfort, a stockbroker whose massively corrupt firm financed years of drugs and debauchery for him and his cronies in the 90s. That is, until arrogance and sloppiness helped the FBI take him down and ever so gently punish him for his crimes.
Country Club Jail. Or, in a nutshell, Martin Scorsese's Babylon.
Yes. Oh my God.
The early part of that movie especially.
Big time, yeah.
Rotten Tomatoes numbers are pretty good. 80% of critics like the film. 7.8 out of 10 is the average. There are 289 reviews on the site and 83% of audiences. It's 133rd on the IMDb's 250. I didn't look this up, but I'm guessing 3, 4, 5 other Marty movies are on there. At least 3, I'm guessing. Probably a lot of Leo and Bob as well, and of course their collaborations together. The film was 28th at the 2013 U.S. box office. 12 Years a Slave was 62nd. We covered that. That was a competitor for Best Picture, and it won Best Picture. Fruitvale Station was 123rd. We covered that quite a few years ago. And Inside Llewyn Davis was 127th. We covered that earlier this year, and that was also a Now Playing Project podcast. So if you want to hear our first thoughts about it, go back many years, or go back a few months to, I guess it was January. This is easily Marty's biggest hit ever, although it's only Leo's number 5. You can guess what number 1 is. Titanic, of course.
The other movie where he's in a boat that goes under, a giant boat that goes under.
Yeah, apparently he says something in that scene in this movie that harkens back to that one with Kate Winslet. This film was up for 5 Oscars and did not win any of them. Best Picture, Best Director for Scorsese, of course, Leonardo DiCaprio for Best Actor. He finally won 2 years later for The Revenant. Jonah Hill for Best Supporting Actor. He'd been up twice in 3 years because he was up for Moneyball in 2011. And Terrence Winter's Adapted Screenplay. Okay, then The Wolf of Long Island is what this probably should be called. We talked in that other podcast about, are they ever actually on Wall Street? Because they start a firm when I think he and Donnie are still in Long Island. They never seem to move Stratton Oakmont. So really, I guess it's the Wolf of... But then again, I guess the Wall Street thing refers to the business you do, not necessarily that you're actually literally on Wall Street.
You're working in the stock exchange. The stock exchange is on Wall Street, yeah.
So anyway, what do you think of it this time?
There are some fair criticisms of this film, but I can't help being drawn into it every time I watch it. It's so fun. The performances are out of this world, and it's Scorsese's funniest film by a country mile. I think it might be his best film of the 21st century.
Well, he's only made 3 movies since Hugo, which you didn't like. I liked it more than you did.
Correction, I hated it.
Okay, fine. This... Silence, and The Irishman. We didn't like Silence that much. Did you even see that?
No, I know.
Okay. I might see it again one day, but it is 2 hours and 40-something minutes long. And The Irishman, which we didn't like, we thought was remarkably overrated. Although provided one of my favorite ever Oscar moments when Bong Joon-ho referenced him in his own Oscar speech, and Marty got the standing ovation. I've watched that probably 5 times since the last time I mentioned it on this podcast. I love that moment. But you said the entertainment thing. Raging Bull, I think, is a great movie. You and Chris, my former podcast partner, are not fans of that one. Many people aren't. Then again, it tends to be highly ranked on serious critics lists. But it's not that entertaining. This movie harkens back more to, of course, Casino and especially Goodfellas.
You could almost call them a trilogy.
That's true. And part of the problem is that everybody in the movie, or nearly everybody in the movie, is a horrible human being. Certainly the main characters are. But it's the old thing of The Godfather, Pulp Fiction, so many Scorsese movies where we're with these people, so either you put your lot in with them, whether you like them or not, or you can't watch it at all. Maybe that's the problem that people like you have with Raging Bull, is that you don't want to put your lot in with this guy because he's so awful, but he's by far the main character. He's in, I think, every scene. Here you've got people that we hate. How do you not hate these people? This is part of why the economy is the way it is.
We are, in a roundabout way, direct victims of Jordan Belfort and people like him, who either broke the law like he did, or bent the law, worked around the law, or wrote the law themselves because they were rich enough to do it. They hurt a lot of people. That includes us. I mean, look at the world today. It was created by all the Jordan Belforts in the world, or the people who were doing exactly what Belfort did, but clever enough to get away with it. Because one of the things is Belfort could have gotten away with it. He just got so greedy, and he was so ridiculous and sloppy. Was he even 30 by the time he went to prison?
Probably not.
Yeah.
He was 22 in the scene with Matthew McConaughey playing Mark Hanna.
It says the year he turned 26, he made $49 million, which really pissed him off because he was only $3 million away from making $1 million a week.
Right. Well, if that's the case, that's the early 90s then, because it's 87 when he gets his broker's license, and then Black Monday or Friday? Black Monday?
Shoot. I think it's Black Monday.
Okay,
yeah.
So the crash that happened in 87, which is the worst they'd had since 1929. But we first meet him doing the Stratton Oakmont commercial and the dwarf tossing thing, which they come back to later, which is kind of like a Goodfellas thing, too. We see them taking the body of Billy Batts out to the middle of nowhere. As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. And then we come back to that scene exactly like that much later on. Well, here it's the dwarf tossing thing. One thing about that scene that we commented on that isn't that funny, but you have to look at it from the standpoint of people that are working in the next room, the great big open room where they all do their job. They see Jordan, Donnie, Nikki, Robbie, Freddie, whatever the hell their names are.
Polly.
Sitting in the, I guess it's Jordan's office, talking at the conference table about the dwarf tossing thing. So unnecessary, so immoral, and how much money that's going to cost. But it probably looks to them like they're talking about important stuff. And how often do these morons do stuff like this? Probably talking about, well, we're going to get our drugs from here this time, because they do drugs constantly. He talks about his drug regimen in the opening, talking directly to the camera. But I just thought that was interesting to note that these people probably think, oh my God, Jordan's doing it again in there. What he's doing is fucking stupid.
That would be Exhibit A of scenes that could have been a quarter of the length or cut altogether.
It's fitting, though, that this movie about excess is excessive. It's literally 3 hours long.
But I read a review that insinuated they were probably up against a deadline. They wanted that Christmas Day release, and it truly needed another month in the edit suite. I think this movie had another month in the edit suite where they could hone it out and polish those scenes that needed more work done on them, then it would have been Goodfellas. There's a Goodfellas in this movie that is just too shaggy and sloppy.
I said, this is pretty good, fellas.
Good enough, fellas.
Funny, too, that, of course, Thelma Schoonmaker always worked with Marty, always has, still does now, since Raging Bull, was the editor on this. And it may be just what you're saying there, lack of time. Not that she was being too indulgent with him.
Although, even as I say that, maybe that's a generous estimation, because I think all of his films are too long lately. The Irishman, that was our massive complaint. You gotta kill your darlings. But he doesn't have to kill his darlings because he's Martin Scorsese, and I don't think anybody's gonna tell him what to do anymore. So if he says, no, you don't understand, this scene of the boardroom is so funny, and I love these actors, I love their performance, and look, they improv that, I can't cut it out, it's gold. You can tell that scene is improv. You know how I can tell? Because they let it go on too long. It looks like actors improving to me because they're repeating themselves.
You know what's fitting? Is that Jonah Hill's in that scene, and he's a veteran of Apatow. His movies are way too long, and he indulges and encourages in a great way the improvising, and then I can't cut this out, it's too good.
I can relate to sitting in an edit suite, and it's my friends, my coworkers, people I know, people who I think are so funny and cute. I don't want to cut them out. I don't want to cut them down. You love it because they're your buds. Mm-hmm. And especially if it's their work, it's their creativity going into it, you might be even that much more sentimentally attached. All of these are guesses as to why he got sloppy in this film in particular, but I think in all of his recent films. And The Irishman, it is unforgivable. It's insane how redundant that movie gets.
What about Matthew McConaughey's scene where we see him doing the which Leo plays back later, so he stole it from his old friend. We never see McConaughey after that scene at the lunch table, or maybe we see them when they go back to the office. I forget exactly the order.
But they do bring that sound back in the credits. They incorporate it into one of the songs.
And McConaughey actually does that before, maybe not every single take, but before he starts filming a scene.
None of that was in the script. Speaking of improv, that wasn't in the script. That was just something they knew he did, and they were like, oh, this would be cool. And you watch that scene knowing that those two actors were winging it.
And Leo's playing innocent kid, too.
Yeah, you buy for about 30 seconds, you're like, sure, you drank water. I'm sure that you went from drinking water, just a little innocent,
to a year or two later, you're a complete addict.
Green, 6 years later, whatever it is, He's like, I do enough drugs to kill the entire state of New York every day. Like, all right, bro.
Well, that's part of the braggadocio and the lie.
Yeah.
He's a flat-out liar.
Yes.
Look at the way he has such disdain for that customer he's selling the penny stocks to,
Oh.
giving him the bird and everything. This is part of the problem with all this stuff, too, on Wall Street, is that you could probably do it legally, and I guess a lot of what he did was legal. The real Belfort said that we couldn't have got away with it as long as we did if we weren't doing legit business. So apparently they would go after the Steve Maddens of the world. What was that shoe company again?
Steve Madden. It's just called Steve Madden.
Okay, right. So go after those kinds of people and have these huge business deals where they make so much of their money. And by the way, that's Jake Hoffman, Dustin Hoffman's son. And they make him out to be such a loser, and in front of him, they're mocking him, which I thought was interesting.
No, that's such a...
Probably based on
like,
true.
those are fat girl shoes. I'm like, why is she saying that? How much coke is in that room? But at this point, you know,
they're trying to get him
all
to be,
been riled
to work
up
with
to
them.
be like borderline animals. That would never have happened at Lehman Brothers.
He could have walked away.
Maybe he should have. Well, he definitely should have, because you say it's all in the up and up. That specifically is the deal that got them in the most trouble, because they bought all the stock themselves first. It was a pump and dump scheme. Everything they did was a pump and dump scheme. So yeah, they would have some legal trades, lure people in. As they described, they would start off with those blue chip stocks and just keep everything on the up and up. And once they had their clients sucked in and trusting them, then they would sell them junk that they would blow up the price of, and then sell their own shares so that they got rich off of their clients.
And the clients either made, basically came back with the money they put into it or nothing. I've got my notes here, a quote, not real. And I think that's what McConaughey says to Belfort. Meaning that all of this...
Fugazi, whatever.
Yeah, this whole thing is illusion.
Yeah.
And that was back in 87. Money isn't real, even more so now. How often do we actually handle money? We do it with a credit card or with a debit card.
And the idea that these trusted stockbrokers who are working for their clients are actually trying to make the money, that is a magic trick too. It's a lie. They're just trying to convince them to drop one stock and buy another so that they can keep making other commissions, because that's how they get rich. There's definitely a missed opportunity here to cut out a scene or two of Jonah Hill eating a fish, or this room full of men in suits tearing up during a pep talk, and instead illustrate to us that there are real people getting hurt who surely share far more in common with the audience of this film, like you and I, than Jordan Belfort does. And I think that criticism is fair. We shouldn't have to work to connect all the dots between Belfort's crimes and actual harms that he caused. I think the movie should have painted more of a picture for us. And instead, what you end up with is this film that glamorizes Belfort as much as it's showing that, yes, he's a bad guy. Look, he does drugs. At the very end of the movie, when everything is going totally haywire, we see him beat his wife. When you've already spent 2.5 hours, whether or not you're on his side, you definitely are indulging the fantasy with him. And it is a fantasy.
You might want to do all the things he's doing, but you really shouldn't ever want to hit your wife.
Yeah, but after we showed you all of these fantasy sequences of him on his yacht and the parties and the helicopter, scene after scene of him and his cronies partying like frat boys that just won the Powerball, there's the total disregard for the consequences of this circus and people who will do anything you ask because you're throwing money around like beads at Mardi Gras. There are consequences for the people who work for him. There are consequences for his clients.
He almost gets away scot-free, though, because he rats on them.
Even the movie's implying he didn't get punished enough, that he only spent 22 months in Club Med prison. Do you know who his cellmate was?
Madoff?
It was Tommy Chong. Tommy
right,
Chong
yeah,
of
right.
Cheech and Chong was his cellmate. So, oh, poor Jordan Belfort. And the movie even fails to address that there was a massive fine. Oh, he just spent 2 years in prison. Look, he's doing great. He was ordered to pay back something like $110 million, something that he's apparently still struggling to do because they've got him under a microscope. So he does these tours that we see at the end of the film, the motivational speaking tours where he goes to, he's in New Zealand in the movie.
He can't be a broker anymore, I guess, right?
Oh, God,
probably
I hope
not legally.
No, probably not. I know he got paid $1 million for the movie and made money off of his book, and who knows what else. His profile is probably higher now than it ever was, even though this movie's supposed to have hurt him.
Well, this is 10 years ago the movie came out. It probably isn't as high a profile now.
I never heard his name before the movie came out.
No,
He's still a household name in this house, right?
You know,
he's still much more famous.
You just talked about the consequences. Chris and I talk so often about sports movies on Scoring at the Movies. Well, it was always sports movies. Good God, that noise. We talk sometimes about how it was a 20-year-old, 22-year-old, whatever, being an asshole. Soldiers go to war when they're 18, 19 years old, and then they do terrible things over there. I'm not excusing them. I just talked last week about coming home. I'm the one on our podcast who's been critical of soldiers after I saw The Invisible War, where rape in the military was so rampant and probably still is. And people keep their mouth shut about it, even if they didn't do anything to the woman, sometimes to the guys. These guys are awfully young. Soldiers are awfully young. Baseball players and football players and basketball players are awfully young. We ask young men, sometimes women, to be responsible, mature adults. Justin Bieber was so hated for being such a punk. He was a fucking child. I doubt he's a punk anymore. At least not that way, because he's grown up a little bit. I'm not excusing Belfort, but that's part of the problem. He got this much responsibility and got rich this fast. Land of the free. Of course, why not? Even if he is a young guy. Because maybe if he was 30 years old, he wouldn't have done some of this stupid shit. Look how calm he is when he's off the sauce and off the drugs, talking to Donnie, drinking non-alcoholic beer. Maybe he would have been like that. But he's given all this responsibility and all this opportunity to be an asshole. And guess what? He's an asshole. And so is Donnie, and so are the rest of these guys.
But are you mad at him for being an asshole, or are you mad at him for breaking the law?
I'm not talking about him.
Getting his money.
I'm talking about our mentality that we gave this much responsibility, money, and opportunity to kids.
But he wasn't a kid. I mean, he was an adult.
When you're early 20, you're a kid. To me.
Okay, yes, we're old enough that when you're 22, you're basically a newborn child. I totally agree with you. And if I was being held accountable for every decision I made when I was 22, I wouldn't necessarily be proud of it. But at the same time, when I was 22, I knew better than to steal. I knew better than to break the law.
I'm just saying that's part of this problem, too. And look at the thing with Mark Hanna. I don't think McConaughey's playing too old, but he's certainly older than Jordan is. And he's the one saying this is all just bullshit, but he masturbates multiple times a day. It sounds like he's cheating on his wife. He seems like an okay mentor. We don't see enough of him to really know if he's not. Jordan, then again, still seems like this innocent when he meets up with Spike Jonze's character. And Spike Jonze and those guys aren't really doing, I don't think, anything all that immoral and all that illegal, are they?
Yeah, it's like shady, but I think it's perfectly legal. What he does when he works for them is perfectly legal. They just don't expect them to sell that many stocks because they're at the bottom of the totem pole. They're just doing their best. So he just happens to have this gift for being a great salesman, which is not illegal to be a great salesman.
And also, here's an actor playing a character who's often acting.
Oh, yeah. And he lies to people all the time.
And the lack of moralizing by Marty, I said this on the other Wolf of Wall Street podcast 10 years ago, that's what he did in Goodfellas. He's the one that was going to be a priest rather than a filmmaker when he was younger. And you're not supposed to judge people as a priest. I'm sure they do. But you're not supposed to be judging people as a priest either. That's up to God to do, right?
So what's your take on the lack of moralizing in this film? It's everybody's main complaint about the film. You could also argue there's not enough moralizing in Goodfellas. You're just on Henry's side the whole time. He does bad things, but he's so charismatic, and it's such a fun film to watch.
And he breaks the two rules that De Niro's character had said to him, what's his name again? Jimmy had said to him when he was young, never rat on your friends and always keep your mouth shut. And at the end, he does both of them. And then he has to have this shitty life as a schnook. But then, oh boy, you belong in jail for decades, you fucking asshole, and you're going to whine because your life isn't what it once was. I saw a documentary recently on Disney Plus. They've got all the 30 for 30s on there. And the real Henry Hill talks about this stuff. He is such a loser, lying scumbag. He might be a moron, too, on top of everything else.
Well, it's like when you see real video of Jordan Belfort. Leonardo DiCaprio did him so many favors. If I saw that man in the real world, I would not get in an elevator with him. He looks like a coked out psycho. Yeah. He talks like a coked out psycho. He is somebody I would cross the street to avoid. But Leonardo DiCaprio is doing his dance and doing blow off Margot Robbie's tits, making it look amazing.
Blow it up a hooker's ass?
Yeah.
How is it better, by the way? How is it better to do it that way?
I don't know.
Would it dilute it?
You're putting it right up your nose. I guess you don't mind the smell. I don't know. But at least with Goodfellas and Casino, although Casino is like a great bridge between the two movies, Casino is a more legal version of what Henry Hill was doing. Gangster is trying to go legit with casinos. Casinos are definitely another shady business practice. And then you go to Wolf of Wall Street, which is a very legitimized way to rob the public.
And the real scandal in 2008 was that so much what those guys did was legal.
And the stuff that was illegal, one guy went to prison. That was it. It was a crime.
And it wasn't one of the CEOs.
Yeah. But when you watch Goodfellas, all my life wanted to be a gangster. Well, gangsters are criminals, and we know that being a criminal is bad, and we know that they're on the outskirts of society, and then that this isn't good. Versus Wolf of Wall Street, where we have been primed our whole life to not just want to be wealthy, but to respect wealthy people, to treat the wealthy like the true main characters of society. Yeah. How many movies and TV shows are about wealthy people, and it's never really questioned how they got wealthy. Even if you were born with money, you were somehow considered in higher esteem. This is baked into our culture, and it has been for many, many generations. And Wall Street is this very esteemed way to make money, even though it is corrupt to its very core and kind of what's wrong with society, kind of going to be responsible for taking down democracy, certainly taking down the environment.
I think that's what Marty's showing in this movie then.
Well, he's showing this one little facet of it, but then he's also showing us the fantasy of it. Of course, we've all fantasized about the house and the yacht, and there would be more than enough money for us to be satisfied. Of course, I think most of us would be satisfied with much, much less, but probably more than each of us have. I think the film wants each and every one of us to admit that it would be fun to have a bottomless pit of money, and it would be intoxicating to be worshipped by a room full of people either because you're paying them too much or you're fixing to make them rich enough to buy their own people. And when we say that this film glamorizes this despicable behavior, we're kind of admitting that it appeals to us.
Definitely. Look at the ending. Sell me this pen to all those people in, I think it's New Zealand.
And they're like the normies, right?
The looks on their faces is that they want to be anything close to what he was then. Maybe even what he is at that moment in reality. Because he has money then. He's doing okay.
They're sitting in a way that we would be sitting in the movie theater. And they're dressed very normally, and their hair doesn't look that good, and they do not look like Hollywood actors.
So they're us.
We are the ones staring star-eyed at Jordan Belfort trying to sell us a pen. We are the ones that look up to him. I think this might be a little too subtle for the average viewer. Criticism of Wall Street is there, and of Belfort's activities, and of those of us that look up to him and think it would be fun to do blow out of a hooker's asshole, I guess.
You know what a big part of this, though? It's that they get to do whatever they want to do, realistically speaking.
It's the freedom.
They're not murdering
Total
people,
freedom.
But they're humiliating people by... That woman who has to play the one who gets her hair cut off,
scene's incredible.
she does not want that to happen, but she wants that $10,000. The dwarf guys don't seem like they're that unhappy about doing what they're doing, but they're being mocked, basically, because they want to make money. They could get hurt. They didn't, but they could have been. You've got all kinds of animals in the office. That could have gone crazy. But also, look at that whole thing in the big speech. I'm not fucking leaving. I'm not fucking leaving. Look what happens with Donald Trump. I'm not leaving the White House.
Oh, yes.
And so many people like that racist rapist because he's not fucking leaving. Or he's not going to apologize for the way he feels. He's not going to apologize for doing the things he did because he doesn't think he did anything wrong. And there's a lot of people out there that feel the exact same way. I didn't rape that woman. I didn't steal that money from that couple in Long Island. I didn't do anything wrong. Why are you even on me at all? Yeah, I won that election, exactly.
And it's an illustration of the point that Belfort makes at the beginning, and he's talking straight to camera, and he talks about all of his addictions, and he says, well, there's one addiction that beats all of them, and that's my addiction to money.
Yeah.
And then he takes the money, throws it in the garbage with all the other $100 bills already in the garbage can. It's not about having the money. It's not even about spending the money. It's about making the money, and that's what he cannot give up when he's trying to say farewell. He's just like, no, I'm too much of a junkie.
Well, these guys would have loved Gordon Gekko, and Wall Street came out the year of the crash in 87. And what's he say in that movie? It's about keeping score. It's about competition. I mentioned athletes a few minutes ago. Guys like Gordon Gekko, guys like Jordan Belfort are partly doing this because they think they're some kind of gladiator, only they're using a piece of paper that we've deemed valuable for thousands of years, or however long it's been that money's been valuable, at least in paper form. And I think that's the same mentality here.
Why else are studio heads and people like Jeff Bezos trying to break up strikes and stop unions from forming?
When they have so much more than enough.
They have an obscene amount of money. It would be impossible to spend it in their lifetimes. And yet they still need to stop people from even making a living wage, fighting labor rights in a way that's actually going to make your product worse. Yeah. Amazon can't retain their employees. You can't work in Hollywood unless you were born independently wealthy. These are all things that hurt your product, and it doesn't matter because it's not about making enough money to spend on what you want. It's about Jeff Bezos being richer than Elon Musk,
right.
Or the studio head being richer than the next
or
studio
I
head.
Worked hard for this and you didn't. And rich people generally tend to work pretty hard, granted, but they act like nobody else does either.
I think that the average warehouse worker at Amazon probably works harder than Jeff Bezos.
What about Jonah Hill in this movie? I said in the previous podcast 10 years ago, we had just seen the movie then, there's no context. Jonah Hill's, let's not talk about that for 10 minutes, but Jonah Hill's an asshole in reality. I wasn't that impressed with this performance. It feels like it's really one note. Rob Reiner's not in the movie that much. I liked him more.
I disagree. I also think Jonah Hill's probably a jerk in real life. I love his performance. It's over the top. He's kind of the clown of the film. Not to say that Leonardo DiCaprio is the straight man, but I love that he takes everything too far. I love that he makes one weird choice after another, and he makes the film weird.
Jonah Hill does.
Yes.
He apparently did this movie for almost no money. He was willing to take scale to work with Marty. I think he even auditioned, which at that point he really didn't have to do anymore. He was coming off an Oscar nomination for Moneyball, like I said already, so he was well known anyway. And then you give him a comic role, and he'd already been doing comic things for years. That's what he did mostly. Moneyball was a serious thing. There's a little bit of comedy in there, but not much.
Yeah, DiCaprio made $10 million. He made $60,000. And yeah, like you said, he was a star. I guess he just wanted to work with Marty that badly. Good on him. I think this might be the best thing he's ever done.
Okay. They share the best scene in the whole film. It is politically incorrect. He does say he has a cerebral palsy phase. Or cerebral. I always want to call it cerebral. Anyway, he says that, and a lot of people would say he's mocking disabled people or something. Well, they took 4 lewds apiece, which are very slow to work for some reason because they're really old. Apparently, lewds were just off the market and weren't sold anywhere.
They're extinct. You cannot
buy them. I guess
them.
They are now, yeah, especially. So anyway, they both do 4. And he has to go to the local club because he can't be on his own phone because it's bugged. The investigator, his lawyer, who I think it's his investigator, is saying, go there and talk to me there. And while he's talking, still fine. He's... I don't know that scene's offensive, but it is really goddamn funny and deliberately thrown off with the number of stairs he sometimes sees, or that we see with the camera shot, because that's the idea. Instead of it being 6 or so stairs, he sees an entire huge staircase he has to try to get down.
They must have built 2 identical sets, one with 12 stairs and one with 6. And, of course, they had 2 drives home.
Yes. Well, the way he has to flop around, he rolls down the stairs. The stuntman did that, obviously, but Leo did some of that.
Legendary. This is like a career peak. Just that scene of physical comedy. I never think of DiCaprio as being a funny actor, but he is hysterical in this movie, and the physical comedy he does, unmatched.
When we reviewed The Revenant for the Oscars preview the year that came out, there are a lot of movies we reviewed since 2016 or so that we didn't actually review. And The Revenant's one of them because it was one of the nominees for Best Picture. And I think you said then that you thought, whenever it was you said this anyway, maybe it was years later after that year came and went and he had won the Oscar for that you thought he should have won for this instead.
Yes. Who did win that year?
McConaughey. Also playing a real guy.
For Dallas Buyers Club. Oh, yeah, it's funny because they have that lunch together. He's the one that takes his Oscar from him.
And this movie came out, I think, after that one already had come out, so people were raving about him in that. What was the McConaissance?
Yes.
Oh, Matthew's going to win the Oscar for that, and maybe it should have been Leo, I don't know. Well, that was a great year for acting. The number of great performances that didn't even get nominated at all. Hanks in Captain Phillips and Redford in
All Is Lost.
All Is Lost, and there are probably 3 or 4 more I didn't even mention. So that was a tough year to try to get nominated for the award. But what about Margot Robbie? First of all, when we first see her, she is so beautiful in clothes, and then whatever it is, 2 or 3 scenes later, she's so beautiful not wearing clothes. And I guess Marty said, you don't have to do this naked, it could just be with really great lingerie. And she said, no, if I'm going to go all the way with this, then I'm going to appear naked.
Oh, really?
It's not like she's on camera for very long.
I'm sure that every young man in America has an imprinted
Yeah, but it's not like
image.
you got 17 shots of every little body part. It's a wide shot from quite a ways away. And then they have the sex for 11, no, what was it? I fucked the shit out of her for 11 seconds, which is what I would be too. So first of all, she looks unbelievable in this movie, and she's pretty good doing a Long Island accent when she's Australian.
I love Margot Robbie. I think she's typecasted herself a little bit since Harley Quinn, and then she was kind of playing the same part
Even
in
in Babylon.
Amsterdam and Babylon. All right, we've seen it. Babylon especially. She's
You're
just doing
nuts.
Harley
We get it. You're
Yeah.
nuts.
Wow, you're so wacky. What is she going to do next? She's very good at it, but she's in danger of being stuck in that role. Barbie, hopefully, has knocked her out of it. She's always going to be playing these high energy parts, though. That's just what she does well. She brings so much energy to the screen.
I don't want to see her make herself look bad and then win an Oscar for that. That's not her.
She's an excellent actress. I think she could probably do anything she wants. The way that she came out of nowhere and blew everyone's minds in this movie, it wasn't just because she is so beautiful. She is perfect. She is just this 1 in a billion face, right?
1 in a billion everything.
1 in a billion everything, yeah. But her performance is electric. Mm-hmm. The scene in the nursery, when she's talking to him...
Which apparently is a shorter version of what they had filmed.
Well, I mean, isn't every scene?
No, but as in, we missed some stuff that really... I think it was her that said it. That would have changed our opinion of the movie or something like that. Or it would have been... I forget exactly what she said, but there was a lot more in that scene that was cut out. Not just because of pacing or it didn't make sense. It would have changed our view on her, him, what have you. But the way they shot that alone, she was wearing underwear, but it's supposed to be that she's not. And you're not going to see this for a long time.
And even beyond that, those individual scenes where she steals it from Leo, she has a great arc through the course of the film where she goes from somebody who's just bought right into his whole philosophy, to this whole lifestyle, to everything that comes with it. And she's happy. She gets a yacht. Oh my God. Everything's so wonderful. And she does seem like this little Barbie doll, this happy, easy, blonde American, and then turns into this angry, bitter isn't right. More like
Justifiably angry.
Justifiably angry, you know? She hates him. The last time they have sex is brutal. And she's so real in it. She's gone from being this easy, flighty, happy person to someone with a core of iron.
And as she says to him on their first date, they're not going to be friends.
Yeah, we're not going to be friends.
And he thinks she means, well, you don't want to be around me at all? No, we're going to be lovers. And he is married at that time to Kristen Milioti, is that her name? Who was in Palm Springs with Andy Samberg. And many other things,
great
too.
Actress. There's a few people that had small parts in this. Thomas Middleditch, who has a scene that could have been cut. In my opinion, it should have been cut.
He's the one with the fish.
He's the one with the fish who gets fired for cleaning his fish tank instead of getting ready for the IPO.
Of Steve Madden, yeah. And we've got a dog on the table, too, in addition to all of our noise situations. One of our fosters. Oh, we didn't tell everybody, by the way, that we had to put Sam down not that long ago.
Yeah.
So without both of our dogs we had for all those years, Sam and Tilly, in about a month and a half or a little more than that.
They both died of old age, and we should all be so lucky, but they are definitely missed around here.
And we've got Becca, the foster,
yeah,
and she has to be on Bev's lap with her face on the table. If you've heard some thump noises, it might be her putting her chin on the table more than once. Okay, another controversial scene, of course, is the gay butler orgy. So the butler's gay, but he has all his guys over. But he apparently stole Jordan's money. Do you think that's real? Did he actually steal the money? Because they basically are ready to throw him over the balcony over it.
Do I think it's real? Everything in this movie, if it came from Jordan Belfort's memoir, which it did,
it could be
I
a
am
lie.
taking with a massive grain of salt. Unless there were other witnesses, unless it literally came up in court proceedings, there's no way I believe a single word out of this man's mouth. Everything has got to be an exaggeration.
From the filmmaker's standpoint, then, maybe that scene should be cut, because does it really serve any purpose?
The whole butler thing could be cut out. It doesn't serve any purpose.
No.
Maybe another example of the way money truly corrupts, because we do see in the background a lot of characters being corrupted by the money around them in minor ways, similar to what Belfort's going through. And that is a great example, is you have a butler who's very good at his job, but just cannot resist the temptation. The temptation is incredible of stealing from him, of using his apartment to have these big orgies. You earlier brought up the scene with the woman getting her head shaved. I think that's actually a really important scene. I don't even think she has a single line. I don't think she says anything.
I think she says a little bit, not much.
But her performance is one of the most impactful performances in the film, because she has this forced smile on her face with tears going down her cheeks, because she volunteered to have her head shaved for what we know is a lunch bill for these guys. We learn later in the film they spent $26,000 on a dinner, but they give her $10,000 to shave her head. And he tells everybody she's going to use the money for a boob job. And they're like, yeah! It's so demeaning.
That's smart. It would be way harder to take that scene as an audience member if it was to save her mother from dying.
Yeah.
Pay a doctor bill.
Pay a doctor bill, or replace her shitty car that
she
can't
wants
get her
to do something
back.
unnecessary and stupid and frivolous like they're doing.
Yeah.
So it makes it a little bit better, but still, she does not want to be doing it. And then the other woman who has a really great scene towards the end, Kimmy, I think is her name. I fucking love you, Jordan. I fucking love you, Jordan. It sounds like he really did help her. I'm not excusing. I wasn't trying to excuse the guy earlier when I talked about how young people are given too much responsibility and they turn out to be assholes. I wasn't saying that's okay. I'm just trying to explain. I think that's one of the reasons this happens, especially in America so often, with young people, with any kind of power, with money. But this is an important scene, too, to show that Marty's not trying to say Jordan was a good guy in general, but everybody can be a good guy to somebody.
Yeah.
Especially when she's like him, wants to be like him at that point. She wasn't yet. She wants to be a shark, too. He bought, what was it, tens of thousands of dollars worth of debt or something like that for her. And then obviously she started making money. She's wearing $10,000 or $20,000 suit. She is loyal to him, or she would have been as much as she could have been. And yet he would have sold her out like he sold it to everybody else.
Oh, 100%, yeah. Although he does try to save Donnie. He gets himself in trouble by trying to save Donnie. To save himself, he wears a wire, but he tells Donnie, and then I guess Donnie's the one that turns on him, because the FBI get their hands on that note that he wrote to Donnie, like, don't incriminate yourself, I'm wired.
I mentioned that scene with the I'm not fucking leaving, because he'd made a deal, and you could see his dad in the background, Rob Reiner, being upset that, what are you doing? We said this is going to work out. You're going to have to do, I think he was going to have to do some time, or, yeah, he probably had to
No,
do
he was
time.
just trying to lay low to not incriminate himself. He may have not been arrested at all if he had just managed
He had to give up the company.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not fucking leaving. But before that's when he's talking about Kimmy. And that scene might be a little too long, but that one may be more necessary than any other. That probably should have been about as long as it was. Because it does build up slowly. First of all, just saying, I'm not fucking leaving. And then, I'm not fucking leaving. And they, like every other time, start acting like a football crowd.
And it's not like you think for one second that Belfort is like, I'm really doing good here. I can't leave. What about the next Kimmy? But it is an important scene to prove, as you say,
This is mine.
Do all bad. He accidentally helped some people while he was making himself and his buddies so rich that they lost their souls.
Well, true, he helped her selfishly because then she'd help him make more money, and really what it comes down to. He probably did it in his own mind at that time for the right reasons.
He is a generous guy in that he's not stingy or miserly with his friends, with his cronies. So he will take a chance on people, and if she had let him down, the next person is going to make me $1 million.
Now, you talked about the time frame. So I wrote down 1993 is when Belfort meets with Denham, and that's the Kyle Chandler character. Offers him a bribe, but isn't blatantly offering him a bribe, but might as well. Things get hostile. So if that's 93, and we said he was 22 in 87, that means that's 6 years later. So he's not even 30 years old when he's got that giant yacht, and now he's in trouble with Denham. Kyle Chandler has a very thankless role to play, but does it quite well. There's a scene where he's on the subway.
Yeah, what do you make of that scene? I've always been bothered by that scene.
Well, it was commented earlier about how he takes a subway like a schmo, like a schnook. And then we actually see it happen, meaning Jordan said that about him on the yacht.
And the subway is poorly lit. Everybody on the subway with him is ugly. It's noisy. It's dirty. You're thinking about how he says his balls are sweaty when he takes a subway. It seems to be proving that he has the worst life. And that maybe he's sitting there being like, maybe I did make wrong choices.
I think it's important that Chandler doesn't really have a look on his face. If he had a look that was either a smile like, it's still worth it because I did the right thing because I'm a moral person. I did my job. Fuck that punk. There could be that. He didn't do that. I'm glad he didn't. It could also be, oh, God, that asshole was right. Oh, I wish I'd taken that money. He doesn't do that either. I'm glad he doesn't do that. There's no real look on Chandler's face, and that's probably the smart way to play that scene.
I understand that pain of just being like a workaday schmuck who's suffering with the hoi polloi and being a member of the hoi polloi.
So Patrick Denham wouldn't do the wrong things. But if you interviewed all those people on that subway car with him and said, let me update you the situation about this Jordan Belfort guy. Do you want to be him? Do you want to be what you are? Or even me, Patrick Denham? They would want to be Belfort. Or at least closer to that than what they're all doing on that train. He's the only one probably that would say, I'd rather do this and rather be me. You mentioned a helicopter ride. Well, of course, we do get the helicopter being knocked off. Apparently, no. In reality, they pushed the helicopter off of his yacht to get the rescue helicopter on there. But in the scene, the water knocks it off. And all these things, what is it, the speedboats get knocked off too? Tens of thousands.
There go the jet skis!
Yeah, that's it. Hundreds of thousands of dollars of stuff's getting blown off into the ocean before the boat even topples over. It gets
capsized.
Right, gets capsized.
And that really happened. That boat really went down. And his plane really went down days later. He would have been on it, but his plane crashed, and that's when he decided to change his ways.
Yeah, the movie's supposed to be it's a wake-up call.
Drugs, yeah.
But earlier we saw that midnight flight to Zurich after they got fucked up for hours before they even go over there, and the things they do on that plane. And that's when he meets Jean-Jacques. Another guy, talk about Oscars, well, Jean Dujardin had won one the same year that Jonah Hill was nominated for one in 2011. Dujardin won it for The Artist. He was in Monuments Men for Clooney as well.
Have you ever seen him work in French?
No.
Some people are great actors in their native language and terrible when they're...
There's that good scene, actually, when they meet, where they both have disdain for each other, and there's subliminal things going on where they both clearly don't like each other.
Well, there's voiceovers telling us what they're thinking. Because
this movie has voiceover, as so many Marty movies do. But we also meet Aunt Emma, Joanna Lumley from Absolutely Fabulous, playing her.
Darling.
She could have been Julie Andrews, I think, could have played her, but she wasn't available to do it after all. So she's pretty good in her small role in the movie, but the whole point of her is to help them get access so they can launder the money through Zurich.
I really love Joanna Lumley, but speaking of scenes that could be cut, the whole scene with, is he hitting on me? Is she hitting on me?
Which led nowhere.
Led nowhere. Pointless. Okay, another illustration that he's a sex addict. We get it. It's not that it's not entertaining, but it does derail the story in a way.
Although this is important, we see them taping money to Brad's wife to go over there. I don't know how that was supposed to ever have not been noticeable unless she wears a giant ski suit on the plane the entire time. But her family helps smuggle a lot more money. But it's not enough. It's like the scenes in Breaking Bad towards the end when Walt has so much money that Skyler can't keep on laundering it through the gas station anymore. Not gas station, the car wash anymore. Getting back in my notes now, I see the cerebral palsy phase. It reminds me, I said before that he and Jonah Hill have a great scene together because so much of that is him on the phone. Get out the phone! I don't understand what you're saying. And then, of course, Jonah Hill is also sounding like he can barely speak English. But it's when Jordan gets home, thinking he drove the car very carefully and slowly, but instead hit everything and destroyed his Lamborghini, I think it was. But then, of course, they have the physical confrontation. He climbs over the island of the kitchen.
Chokes him with the phone cord.
Get off the... Well, that's pretty funny stuff, I thought. And then also, Donnie would be choking on the cold cuts until he's saved by his friend, who's the reason why he's choking on the cold cuts. So I thought that was maybe the best scene they played together because they had so much physical stuff to do in that. There's almost a Laurel and Hardy kind of thing. We said already that there's that violent confrontation. It's because they, first of all, have a farewell fuck. It's the second time or maybe third time. I guess third. The first one was 11 seconds. Then we see them on the money. The farewell is, I guess we'd call it rape now. I don't think I would have thought of that 10 years ago as rape.
She tells him no. She tries to push him away. When she finally gives in and relents, she's just staring at the ceiling. Get it over with.
Shows how dumb I was 10 years ago, though, if I didn't think of that
whatever. I think a lot of people would say the same thing.
But her notion
It's not like she had a choice, let's put it that way.
Yeah. Her notion is, okay, you get one last one, and that's it. She slaps him, he punches her back, breaks up the cocaine, just puts his whole face in it because he'd hit it in a pillow on the couch, and then he punches her in the gut.
The real irredeemable thing he does in that scene is
when
he takes the daughter, puts her in the car, puts
Amber
her in
Alert.
danger, crashes the car immediately with her in the front seat with no seatbelt on. The kid is lucky that she wasn't hurt, and I think that's the moment the audience is supposed to turn on him.
Yeah.
And maybe we do, but then it's all undone by that coda at the end where he's doing great.
Well, also, he's the one we're following through the whole movie, so either you're going to hate this movie, and I guess a lot of people did, because of all the things we've said in this podcast, or there's a part of you that has to at least, I guess, sympathize with this guy because he's the character we're seeing in almost every single scene. If not every single scene. Well, no, there's the one with Jonah Hill and John Bernthal, who's pretty effective in this, which is also way too long. But Jonah Hill's being a dick for no reason whatsoever. And them having this money exchange in public like that was dumb on both their parts. Bernthal seems to be together in the whole film.
Movies always do this. Oh, we have to have this big clandestine meet-up in public where we exchange the money. Why don't you just pull your car into his garage?
Or go into that fast food place that's right there and do it. So cops can't see you on the street. But I think Bernthal did a good job in this, playing Brad. He gets contempt, gets, I think, a couple years, and they say he dies when he's only mid-30s.
Yeah, a heart attack, which is tragic, but then you can also assume with the kind of drugs he was dealing, he was probably damaging his heart with his activities.
And Jordan does go to federal prison, but it's not federal pound me in the ass prison, which is, who says that?
That's an Office Space.
That's it, right,
yeah.
Because he does have the country club lifestyle. And we talked about the ending in New Zealand, Sell Me This Pen, because he's now a motivational speaker. And we see him actually filming some of that stuff when Denham comes to arrest him. That's a pretty funny moment, too. He's right in the middle of just doing this job, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with him doing that stuff, even if he is a bit of a con artist. If you want to believe a motivational speaker or a palm reader, all those kinds of people, and you put your money into that, or go to a casino and blow your money on blackjack, that's your problem. I don't really have sympathy for you if you do those things, as long as those people aren't trying to tell you, well, they are trying to tell you they're going to fix your life, but you really should be more of an adult and not believe that that's true, because they're not going to. So Leonardo DiCaprio, we covered in Titanic, The Departed, Inception, and Django Unchained. I love that group of people. You got some major talents that he's been directed by. You got Cameron, you got Scorsese, you got Nolan, and you got Tarantino. And now here we got the second Scorsese movie. He went from the glitz and the good clothes and the excess in this movie to making The Revenant. That was his very next project where he won the Oscar, and he is not getting a chance to be glitzy, wear good clothes, or have money, or even fun. There's no fun in that movie at all.
Or even temperature control.
Right, yeah. He suffered in that one. That's why he won. It was also that he was so overdue. And he gave a great speech. I've been talking a lot about great speeches at the Oscars the last little while, but that was one of the best ones ever. Made Kate Winslet cry.
Oh, and as much as I would never want to get stuck sitting next to this man on a plane, I'm sure he's an insufferable jerk in real life, but he is one of the greatest actors of his generation. He really earned it.
Well, somebody said this a while ago, and I mentioned this in one of the podcasts we've done, I forget which one it was, that he might not be in always the greatest movies, but is he ever himself bad in a movie?
No, you're right. He's never given a bad performance. And he is a true movie star in the sense that he amplifies every scene he's in. He really brings the energy, and it's rarely as well illustrated as it is in Wolf of Wall Street.
Well, he may be into debauchery as well, and people always make fun of the girlfriends being a third of his age at this point. He's my age, so not a third of his age, I guess, but half of his age at most.
And don't they say that the jerk movie star character in Molly's Game is based on him and Tobey Maguire?
Yeah, the Michael Cera character is supposed to be Tobey Maguire
And if that's true, then he's a real sinister piece of work.
He's also been a big proponent of the environment before a lot of other celebrities were, so at least he does give a shit about a cause that really matters. I haven't heard him say so much about it lately, but people are complicated. That's one thing this movie's saying, I guess. People are very complicated. Jonah Hill, I said already, made less money on this than he ever had before, but he is... Okay, you think he's great in the movie. I think he's at least pretty good. Not a word worthy, I don't think. He had a small role in Django Unchained, very funny one as well.
Yes.
And then he's also, as I said, in Moneyball. Margot Robbie. So a lot of these now are movies I covered with Chris on Scoring at the Movies. You and I have not covered some of these people until now. Bernthal, Robbie, Jonah Hill, I guess briefly. But she was in I, Tonya, which Chris and I did on Scoring at the Movies, the sports movie podcast.
Great performance.
And she was nominated for that. Maybe could have won for that. Matthew McConaughey we have covered before. We covered How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Ugh, I hate that movie so much. That was 10 years before this, before The Reconnaissance.
Is that the only Matthew McConaughey movie we've ever done?
I think so. Well, Chris and I did Angels in the Outfield, the 1994 version. He's in that. But Bernthal, here we go. 3 times I've covered him before on Scoring at the Movies. Peanut Butter Falcon, Ford versus Ferrari, and King Richard. So all sports movies. And he's got a pretty big role in King Richard especially. Rob Reiner acts in this. He acted in Sleepless in Seattle a couple months ago. We covered that. But he's, of course, directed mostly. Stand By Me, When Harry Met Sally, Misery, and A Few Good Men are all on this channel somewhere. And he's one of the more, I don't know about underrated directors. People gave him his props long ago. I think he steals this movie. He's not in the movie that much. Also, it's funny to see in the credit list, where is it there? Jon Favreau is 2 spots down to Rob Reiner and barely shows up as the lawyer Manny. Was he got maybe 2 scenes?
There's like 3 big shot directors that are actors in this movie because there's them plus Spike Jonze.
Kyle Chandler was in Argo, Zero Dark 30, and Carol. We covered all those before. Kenneth Choi, he's the Asian guy of the assholes. Bloody motherfucking assholes. He's in the new Spider-Man film, so I guess he's one of the voice characters in the Spider-Verse movies. PJ Byrne, he's the one that seems to be basically third in command with them. He was in Green Book in a small role. Ethan Suplee, another one of the assholes, was in Remember the Titans. Chris and I did that for Scoring at the Movies. Favreau, we've covered a lot of times before. Tiny role in this, but Elf, which he directed, of course, too. Iron Man, also directed that. And he's in The Replacements and Rudy on Scoring at the Movies. Aya Cash, I didn't know who the hell that was until more recently because she's in The Boys. Sorry, was in The Boys. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Spoiler. They killed her off, but she might come back. That seems to be the implication that they might do that, right?
I honestly can't remember.
I think they did kill her, though.
They ended things with her. She was in the hospital.
But she's one of the supporting players in this. Shea Wiggum, same year as this was in American Hustle. Our now playing project podcast of Wolf of Wall Street was also American Hustle. We always did 2 at once. And he was in Silver Linings Playbook. We covered that last year, and that was the year before this movie came out.
He is so funny as the captain of the Naomi.
Nadine, I think is her real name.
Yes, Nadine is her real name.
They changed
most. Yeah.
Donnie is Donnie Purish, not Donnie Azoff.
They just wanted to avoid lawsuits, probably because they knew that Belfort was talking to his ass and they couldn't trust him to be honest about anything. And, you know, there's fact-checking and then there's just making a Hollywood film. We're just going to print the legend. What do you want from us?
Marty, we've covered lots of times before. Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, The Last Temptation of Christ, Goodfellas, The Departed, and I did Color of Money on Scoring at the Movies with Chris. The writer Terrence Winter mostly has done TV, including The Sopranos and Boardwalk Empire, which was a Marty thing, right? He was a producer on that. Yeah. And it was based on Belfort's 2007 memoir. There were a lot of producers, but Marty, Leo, and Emma Tillinger-Koskoff and Joey McFarland were the ones that got nominated for the Oscar. Koskoff was nominated 2 times in 1 year, was The Irishman and Joker.
Oh, wow.
Because Marty was involved with Joker, so she's one of his people, I guess. Just like Spielberg always has Christy McCosco Krieger working with him on all of his movies. Somebody I'd never heard of before, so I guess it's probably a mentor-mentee relationship. Not to say the woman isn't a talented person, but we never heard of her name, and they're working with this huge name. And they get nominated for Oscars lots of times as producers, both Koskoff and Krieger.
A producer you didn't mention was Riza Aziz. He worked with Red Granite Pictures, which was involved shortly after in a corruption, bribery, and money laundering scandal. Just like Jordan Belfort, apparently all the financing that went to this film was corrupt, and people were stealing from it. You talk about this $100 million budget. Well, a few of those millions, I guess, went missing.
I think that might be a really common thing in Hollywood.
Well, I remember hearing someone say once, how come all these movies cost $300 million? Whatever happened to the $15 million feature? And somebody said, well, it's a lot harder to steal $1 million from a $15 million budget.
That's where I heard that. You told me that.
I mean, I saw it on Twitter. I certainly can't take credit for it.
They're probably right.
They're probably right. Part of the reason for these big budgets is because they're all grifting. They're all skimming off the top. There's no way they're not cooking the books, because when you look at the accounting in Hollywood, you're like, none of this makes any sense. You will talk about a movie that made $500 million and say that it came in at a loss. Meanwhile, every movie exec has a yacht the size of a city.
And they say they can't afford to pay the writers and the actors.
Oh, yeah.
The movie's 239-1. We saw it on Blu-ray. It's probably available streaming, but we own the Blu-ray. The cinematographer, Rodrigo Prieto. I saw his name just a few days ago when we saw Barbie, because he shot that too. So he's seen Margot Robbie look the best she ever has twice, I guess, now. He also shot 25th Hour for Spike Lee, Brokeback Mountain, and Argo. Also did other movies with Marty. Maybe both Silence and The Irishman, and probably this new movie, Killers of the Flower Moon. I didn't confirm that. But he shot some beautiful movies over the years. We know Schoonmaker cut it. She cuts all of Marty's movies. And there's no composer, just pop hits. So what do you think of the look? And we are technically cutting. It's too long. It's not her best work. She wasn't nominated. The Departed she won for. She won for The Aviator. Both those movies are very long. Raging Bull many years ago. And she's been nominated, I'm pretty sure, more times than just those times. But not this time. Fittingly.
It's a little sloppy. It's definitely shaggy. Felt like it needed another month.
But technically you thought the movie looked good, though?
I love the look of the movie. Apparently, they fought to shoot it on 35. They were really close to just shooting it on digital, the way everybody was switching at the time. But Marty did tests, and he was like, no, this is the look I want. And it's the look I miss, to be honest. Something that's colorful and poppy, and it just looks really beautiful. There's no weird gray tones. Feels very appropriate for the subject matter as well. He did a lot of needle dropping in this film. I don't know. Is he getting lazy with it? Either the song was so on the nose that it's ridiculous, or songs he's used before. And all right, you can afford the big hits of your favorite songs, and you're just kind of putting them in there.
50 years, so that's why.
I mean, I can't complain. It's a great soundtrack with fun hits. I love that French version of Jet Boy, Jet Girl. That really charmed me. So, okay, I take it back. I like the needle dropping.
He's been needle dropping since before Leo was born. He started making movies in the late 60s.
Yeah.
And Mean Streets came out right around the time Leo was born.
Yeah. It's always been his way. I feel like when it's done well, it's so brilliant because you can really evoke a time and a place and a specific emotion in your viewers, maybe even more directly than when you have an original piece of score.
What happens next? Well, we know there's reality, so we can look that up, and we have talked about some of the real things that happened since the events of this film. Well, I say in a fictional way, Jordan gets back on top because guys like him always do, even when they are ex-jailbirds, while his shithead employees continue to find ways to screw stupid people out of the money. A lot of them are stupid. Assholes like this run the world, always have, and always will.
I would also say that Jordan Belfort is so over the top that guys like him always end up back in prison because he is never going to be satisfied with enough.
Henry Hill.
Even
and
with
back in prison.
Yes, or like O.J. Simpson. There are people who need more, even when it puts them in danger. It doesn't make any sense at all. So I will not be surprised to learn one day that he's gotten himself in trouble again.
So last thoughts on The Wolf of Wall Street. The Wolf of Long Island.
It is, in my opinion, total top-tier Scorsese. One of his best films, best film of the 21st century so far. I wish it was more responsible with its message, but you know, there are people out there who think Patrick Bateman is a hero.
He is in Goodfellas and Casino territory here. Not as good as those movies. You said already. He could have made Wolf of Wall Street that much better with more time. They were probably rushed. And while it's not as good as that, I did enjoy this. I've seen it probably 4 times. It was an entertaining movie, especially that scene at the club when he took the lewds. God, that still is so funny after seeing it all these times. One more thought about Marty being a priest. I feel like this movie might be a bit of a confession, which is also probably true about Goodfellas in some ways. It's not just, I don't get to enjoy that life, which he does say, and I fucked over my friends. It's also, if you gave me that chance, and Henry Hill in reality did, not the same things, but did do wrong things again. Well, Marty nearly killed himself with drugs and all kinds of excesses in the late 70s. If you go that far, then you were having fun doing it, as Jordan does in this movie. And I bet there's a good chance anybody who does all that wants to do it again, even if they are now in their 80s. And I think he's been clean, Marty, since the late 70s, early 80s. I don't think he ever regressed. We've never seen evidence of anything like that.
You never really had a party phase. I had a party phase. And I'm not saying that I'm in danger of ever drinking and doing drugs like that again.
But you miss it.
But I do miss it. Yeah. There's plenty of times where I'm like, oh,
I partied
man.
In school.
Okay, if that's fair. You partied. You didn't go clubbing like I did.
No, and I didn't do drugs at all. I've only done edibles in the last few years with you, and that's just pot. I've never done anything more serious than that. So anyway, I think there has to be a big part of him that loved filming all this debauchery and the terrible behavior because he was reliving his youth in some ways. He may not be like that anymore, but probably in some ways he'd still love to be, even in his 80s. Okay, that was The Wolf of Wall Street with the addition of the noise outside, the early rain we had. Afternoon recording. Burns you sometimes. In 7 days, we'll be changing it up. We were going to cover Old Boy, but we finally saw the #1 movie on the Sight and Sound's 2022 list not too long ago and thought maybe we should tell the world what we thought of Chantal Ackerman's Jean Dielman, and there's a lot more of it 1080 Bruchel. We'll say the title next week when we do the movie.
As I said, have you seen the movie? No, but I've read the title.
And it took almost as long as the movie. Another excessive film. So that's what you'll get on August 21st, a little Genie Deals. We'll probably get to Old Boy in the next month or two. I think we will cover it before the year is over. The coming attractions opinion question for Gene Dealman. Everyone talks about how this is a vanguard of feminist filmmaking. So what do you think is the most feminist film you've ever seen?
Oh my God.
Is it Gene Dealman?
So for the answer to that question, check out next week's podcast about Gene Dealman. You obviously already know how to find us, but let me remind you to please favorite or subscribe wherever you listen, which is also where you can find our archive of hundreds of episodes that are available for free. We're both on Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis, and Ryan is at MovieFiend51, or you can reach us by email, haveyouvseensepodcast@gmail.com. And you can find our podcast on YouTube too. Our channel is at HYES Ellis. And to enjoy freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada or the US, please go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and enjoy a 20% discount.
I'm not fucking leaving. I'm not fucking leaving!
But we have to go.
Okay, I surrender. Bye.
And cut.